think most of you know that one of my favorite preachers is Ravi Zacharias. When I was in grad school, he came to preach at the school I was attending and spoke over a number of days. And often, he usually preaches about 45 minutes an hour, and often when he's getting to the end, I can't say it as eloquently as he does, but he would say something like this: 3 stories, 2 illustrations, and I'll be done. Stay with me now. What we're going to do this morning is a lot. So I'm just looking at you right now, and I'm just saying, stay with me now. And if I see you sleeping, you're going to hear me. Stay with me now. Read an article, it was written, I believe, in like 2013 in the Chicago Tribune, and it was about the group of people who served in the war in Vietnam. Now, most of them, at that time, the average age was about 64. It's probably a little more than that. And it was telling the stories of some of them now that they're in their 60s, and this is what they found. The first story they told was about a guy named Bill Simon, and Bill came back from the war, got a job, got married, had a family, everything was good, and now he's in his 60s, and all of a sudden, emotionally, he's just coming apart. And he can't figure out what happened. Something he'll see or something he'll hear, and it'll click something, and he'll start weeping, and he can't stop. When it tells the story that he's not alone, there's a whole bunch of people that are facing the same thing. What happened? Well, they don't know. Maybe it's the testosterone levels have dropped or retirement or something, but all of a sudden, the things that were able to keep whatever that is deep down inside, they can't do anymore, and it just comes spilling out. Sorrow has a way of getting into our soul. I remember the day that my mom died. She died early on a Sunday morning and went immediately to my dad's house and spent the day. In the afternoon, a pastor friend came to visit. He's also a counselor, and just before he left, he said to my dad, "Make sure that you weep." And this is the way he explained it. He said, inside you, there's like a bucket, and it holds your emotions, it holds your stuff. And in these days when the sorrow is really acute, it's going to fill up fast. And when it does, and it starts to spill over, let it spill. And then he said this. He said, it's been 6 years since my wife died, and the bucket doesn't fill up as fast anymore, but it still does, and there's times when you just don't even expect it, and all of a sudden it spills over. Sometimes sorrow gets really deep inside of us. We have to learn to grieve those things so that we can embrace the things that are in front of us. This is what Jesus said. He said, blessed, let me say it again. Blessed are those who mourn. Really? Yeah. Blessed are those who mourn because they will be comforted. What does that mean to mourn? Well, to mourn means that you grieve, that you express sorrow. You take what's on the inside and you get it to come outside. That's what mourning is. In some cultures, they actually have professional mourners. Wouldn't that be a great job? No, nobody signed up. It's really a very healthy thing. So at a funeral, you hire these mourners to come and they mourn. Even if they don't know the person, they're there to mourn so that everybody else who comes knows that that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to mourn. I was talking with a friend this week who was going through some deep waters, and right in the middle of our phone conversation, he started to cry. And he said to me, Joel, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to cry. Why would you be sorry because you're crying? Like nobody ever tells a joke And then people start laughing and they go, oh, wait, what? Don't laugh. Of course you laugh. It's funny. Of course you cry. It hurts. But in our culture, especially men, you're not supposed to cry. But crying is just that there's something on the inside that needs to come out. So I can see all of you are excited. We're going to talk about weeping this morning. This is going to be great. Actually, the process of grieving is a gift from God so that our hearts stay soft. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." When we were in premarital counseling, the counselor said to me that when you get married, you're going to figure out that women and men don't see the world always in the same way. So I'm just telling you in advance what's going to happen. Your wife is going to explain something to you, and what you're going to do is you're going to try to fix it. But she doesn't want you to fix it. She just wants you to listen. So I'm taking notes. Like I'm 20 years old. Yeah, got it. That, no problem. I'll do that. Well, then it actually happened. We're having this conversation one day, and she's explaining to me something that happened, and she gets done, and I said, well, that's not very complicated. This is what you do. And she looked at me, and she said, I didn't ask you to fix it. Well, I said, well, if you didn't ask me to fix it, what did you tell me for? Like, if you don't want it fixed, leave me alone. I didn't say that. I'm just saying that was the thought process. So she said to me, I don't need you to fix it. I just want you to feel it. What good does that do? You sit around and feel stuff? But Jesus didn't come to fix us. He came to weep with us and to walk with us. So he says, blessed are those that mourn, for they will be comforted. And grieving, it's not just about crying. It's about taking what's on the inside and bringing it out. So how does that work? Well, let's walk through this. Blessed are those who mourn. Why is it necessary to grieve? Well, if I could answer it in one word, it's this: loss. Because we lose things that are really important, and it hurts. Henry Nouwen says it way better than I could. So let me just read you his words. This is from a book called With Burning Hearts, and this is what he says. If there was one word that summarizes well our pain, it is the word loss. We have lost so much. When we were born, we lost the safety of the womb. When we went to school, we lost the security of family life. When we got our first job, we lost the freedom of our youth. When we got married, we lost the joy of many options. And when we grew old, we lost our good looks, our old friends, and our fame. When we became weak and ill, we lost our physical independence. And when we die, we lose it all. And these losses are part of ordinary life. But whose life is actually ordinary? The losses that settle themselves deeply in our hearts and minds are the loss of intimacy through separations, the loss of safety through violence, the loss of innocence through abuse, the loss of friends through betrayal, the loss of love through abandonment, the loss of home through war, the loss of well-being through hunger, heat, and cold, the loss of children through illness or accidents, the loss of country through political upheaval, and the loss of life through earthquakes, floods, plane crashes, bombings, disease. Perhaps many of these dark losses seem far away from most of us. Maybe they belong to the world of newspapers and TV screens, but nobody can escape the agonizing losses that are part of our everyday existence, the loss of our dreams. He's saying that it's not just the big stuff, but it's learning the losses that pile up every day as part of our journey, learning to process those by grieving. Why is this a problem? It's a problem because we weren't created for this. God didn't create us with the equipment for this. So how do you process it in your soul? Well, part of what God asked his people to do in the Old Testament as part of the secret. He said, every week, take a day and give it to me. The things that you do all the other 6 days, don't do them. So what are you supposed to do on this day? Well, one of the things you're supposed to do is stop. And when you stop, you're supposed to look around and see all the goodness of God and say thank you. Why are we so ungrateful? Often it's because we just are blind. We don't stop and look. We're going to talk about that next week. But I think one of the other parts of Sabbath is keeping real short accounts of some of the pain in our souls and bringing it to God and learning to invite him into the story. So this is a question that comes out of it. So what happens if we decide not to grieve? Can we get away with it? Well, yeah, you can, but something happens to your soul. One of the things that happens is your soul begins to wither. It dies. You silence the hopes and the dreams, and you start to become cynical. Maybe if we don't hope so much, it won't hurt so much when we're disappointed. Or another thing that happens is we compartmentalize our lives. What does that mean? Well, you see somebody, hey, how you doing? Well, yeah, I'm doing really well, doing really well. But in truth, on the inside, you're hurting. You're feeling pain. So what do you do with that? Well, you got to keep it quiet, so you numb it. You have this life you live out here, and then you have this private stuff that nobody sees, and you got to numb it. And there's all kinds of ways to numb it. You get addicted to this or that, or just to keep it quiet. Grieving is not the goal. The point of faith is not so we can grieve. Grieving is so that we can restore our faith. It's not the end goal, but sometimes it's the way back to him. Third idea. So if grieving and learning to do that well really helps us, why do we avoid it? Well, we avoid it because it hurts. It's painful. If you go there, it hurts. So it's easier not to. But, I think you'll see this on the screen, when you decide not to feel pain, all the other emotions shut down with it, because your soul can't distinguish between pain and joy. So if you shut this emotion down, that one shuts down too. What does that mean? So if you decide, you know what, this is just too painful, I'm just not going to feel this. I'm just not going to. Well, in your soul, you kind of numb it. Well, the same thing happens to your ability to experience joy. So your soul begins to wither. Joy, Jesus says, actually comes in mourning. M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. It comes through mourning. Last idea, before we look at Psalm 13. Loss happens to all of us. Grieving or mourning is what Jesus invites us to. Are there any other options that we could use? Well, there are actually. Let me lay them out for you. One of the options we have when we face difficulty in our lives is to deny it. Just pretend like it's not there. Now, I'm not even going to ask this morning, who are the people who are really good at denying? Because you won't raise your hands, you'll deny it. But there are people in this room, that's your strategy when you're facing pain. So you can deny it, but it doesn't actually go away, it just goes somewhere else. Let me use this image. I don't know if you've ever taken a beach ball in a swimming pool and tried to hold it underwater. It's a little bit tricky, and the bigger the ball, the more tricky. In fact, at some point, it's just going to come up. So you can push this stuff down in your soul. You can stuff it. But the only way that you can heal it is to let the air out. If you don't let the air out, it's going to come up, but you won't be able to decide where it's going to go. And it could do some real damage to everybody around you. That is an option, though. You can rationalize it. We do this all the time when we're facing pain. In fact, 3 years ago, after my son's death, some of the things that people said to me, I don't think they meant them badly, but they weren't always helpful. People say things like this. Well, you know, I know somebody who lost, and they tell you this long story, and you're like, you know what? That may give me a little perspective, but it just still really hurts. Or they say things like this. One of the ways we rationalize is we try to use a Christian cliche, and we think if we tack that on there, we got it. You say things like, you know, sometimes when God closes a door, he opens a window. You know what? That might be true, but this still really hurts. Another way to face it is with anger and bitterness. That's one of the options when we're faced with sorrow, when we're faced with pain in our soul. And it's actually very popular in our culture. It's a great painkiller. You just get mad. And you can get mad at anybody. It'll work. Bitterness, unfortunately, is a poison. And you take the poison hoping that you're going to hurt somebody else, but it doesn't. It hurts you. One of the other ways that sometimes we choose to face the pain in our souls is by numbing it. You can numb it with alcohol, you can numb it with drugs, you can numb it with sex, you can numb it with work. But if you do that, you just got to keep having more and more to keep it quiet. So Jesus says, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. So how does it work? Thanks for asking. Let me take you now to Psalm 13 and walk through this together. What does it look like to mourn well, to weep well? Well, it's not just about weeping. You can cry all the time and not have your soul healed. You got to weep in the right direction. Some people say, time heals all wounds. That's not true. Time doesn't actually heal anything. God does. But it does take time for healing to happen. That's part of the image we've been using is the image Jesus used, that there's a sower. And he went out to sow. What is he sowing? He's sowing Jesus. He's sowing the gospel. And it's a seed. And when it's planted in you, it takes life and it begins to grow. And he says that some of it falls on ground that is good soil, and it takes and it starts to grow, but all of a sudden there's rock right underneath it. It hits the rock and it withers. Well, what's the rock? The rock is the suffering and difficulties in our life. And if we don't process them, he says, it will harden our hearts. But at the same time, for something to grow, it takes time. So how does this work? Well, the Psalms are given to us to teach us how to commune with God. What do we say to God when we talk to him? Well, if you go to the Psalms, you'll find words. They're prayers, there's songs, there's hymns, there's 150 of them in the Psalms. They're words given to us to address to God. So let me ask you this morning, if you've read the Psalms, what do the Psalms express? Talk to me. What do they express? Okay? Emotions. You can't get away from that. They are emotional. Seriously? When we pray, we're supposed to get emotional? Well, yeah. What kind of emotions do they express? Anger. Talk to me. Okay. Love, praise, pain, it's all in there. But here's the thing. There's 150 of them. 50 of them are psalms of lament. That means they're weeping psalms. Strangely, we don't hear those very much you use those when you're in your bedroom, but in church we stay away from those. In fact, the psalm that we read this morning, Psalm 13, the first time I preached on it, I was in Abidjan, and I was preaching that day, and I got there. The lady who was reading scripture, I gave her the thing, and I said, could you read this? She said, okay. But she didn't read it before. She just got up and started to read it. Well, she starts reading. Oh, Lord, how long have you... She looks at me and she says, is this the right one? I said, yeah, just hang with it, go. So she gets a little farther down, and it's just getting uglier. She looks at me, she says, this guy is really down. I said, stay with him, he'll get there. We're not used to these words, but they're a gift that's been given to us. What does it mean to lament? Well, to lament means to give words to express sorrow, to express grief, sentiment. It's like giving tears words. Like if tears could speak, this is what they would say. They would lament. How does that work? Like, how do you do that with God? And what does that even mean that these things, because if you read the scriptures of every other religion, you won't find these laments. They only exist in the scriptures that we have. And we're supposed to talk to God that way? Like, what does that mean? Well, I think the first thing that it means is that he really wants to have a relationship with us. Because you don't lament to somebody you don't know. Try it this afternoon. Walking down the street, just grab somebody and say, why have you abandoned me? They'll look at you and go, call somebody. This guy's losing. You only lament to somebody you have a relationship with. And the fact that he's inviting us to come to him means that he wants to have a relationship with us. It also means that he's actually the sovereign one. Well, when you read some of these laments, that's not the impression you get. You feel like maybe God lost his way. But really what it's saying is that he's actually the only one who can help us. So if your car breaks down and you take it to Toyota, you don't really want to talk to the night guard. You want to talk to somebody who can actually do something. And when your soul is in pain, that's God. The third thing I think that these laments are saying is that some of them are really brutal. I mean, they are just painful. But I think what it's saying is that whatever happens in our lives, no matter how painful and how ugly, it doesn't shake him. He's okay. He doesn't, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? He's seated on his throne. He's good. So these passionate expressions are given to us in the Psalms. How do we learn to lament? Well, first let me say what they're not. What does it not mean to lament? To lament to God, to express grief to God, is not about whining and complaining. It's not about going to God with all your whining and complaining. That's not it. It's not about telling God all the things he did wrong. If you read these Psalms of David, never does he insult God, never does he bring the person of God into question. He's simply expressing the agony in his soul. It's not about venting. It's not about blowing off steam. It's about coming to God with the deep questions of your soul. So what is a lament? Well, some of them are prayers, some of them are songs, some of them are poems, but they're all addressed to God and teaching us to speak to him. They're inviting us as God's people into a relationship with him. So how does it work? Well, let me try to paint a picture for you. This comes from a guy by the name of Walter Brueggemann in a book he wrote. It's about interpreting the Psalms. Like, how do these prayers actually help you? How do they teach us? Well, here's how he explains it. That in our faith, in our walk with God, it's in movement. Sometimes in our lives, we're in a place of orientation. What does that mean? That means that life is as it should be. It's good. This is how it should be. This is how God created it to be. Yesterday we were at a wedding. It's a time of orientation. It's good. We're all happy and celebrating. This is what should happen. People fall in love. They get married. This is good. Well, when those times are happening, what do you say to God? Well, look in the Psalms. There's Psalms of just unbelievable praise. Psalm 100. Oh, God, the trees are singing, the doors are dancing, it's good. But then Brueggemann says there's other times in our journey where we're just totally disoriented. It just doesn't make sense. Why has my child walked away from God? Why did this person why did this happen to them? Why is this relationship that I just wanted to work, it won't work? Why? Where's God? Well, you still got to talk to him, so what are you going to say? These psalms of orientation don't work anymore. So Brueggemann says that the Psalms give us words to speak to God. If you've been there, you know the comfort of these words. But then he says there's other times that orientation, disorientation, and then we always want to go back to what was. Take us back to Egypt. At least we had something good to eat there. But that's not what God does. If we'll come to him in our disorientation, he takes that and he expands your soul so that your soul can take more of him. And he brings us to what Brueggemann calls a place of new orientation. It's not where we were, it's a new place. So if you read the Psalms, there's a bunch of them. When you start to read it, it says this: sing a new song unto God. Not the one we sang before, not the one we sang when we were, but a new song to celebrate what he's done. So here's the question. How do you move from one of those places to the next? When you find yourself disoriented, how do you get from there to the next place? Well, the only way is to speak. You have to say something. He's not saying you have to talk. He's saying you have to say something. There's some people who talk all the time, but they never say anything. It's not about words. It's about expressing what's in your soul. This is how it works. Those of you who are married, think about a time when you had a disagreement and it wasn't going so well. Some of you are looking at me like, that never happens to us. Yeah, get over it. It does happen. How do you get out the other side of that? Well, I'll show you what won't work. Try this next time. You can do that for like 30, 40 hours, and you won't move. You have to speak. You have to talk about what's inside. You have to dialogue. And the same thing is true of God. You got to speak. What words are you going to use? Well, he gives us these words of lament. And when we speak those, we open the door to healing. If you read these laments, some of them are short, some of them are long, some of them are, but they all follow the same road. And here's the road. They start out by crying out to God. And some of them are agonizing. God, where are you? I've been crying on my pillow for weeks. Where are you? Where are you? The second move in these laments is always an invitation for God to do something. God, please intervene. If you don't show up, your name is going to be dishonored. And it's just this cry to God to do something. But here's the thing. In all of these laments, I think it's number 88, that doesn't, but all of them end with a word of praise and trust to God. So how did you get from there to there? 88 just ends and it's like, it's so dark, forget it. There's no light. This is not going to end well. But all the other ones bring the prayer back to trust. How does that happen? Well, it's the actual expressing of it and bringing what's inside to the outside and letting God reinterpret it. Well, how does that happen? Well, if you read in the Psalms, often you see this word. You'll see a word that says pause, or you'll see the word Selah. What does that mean? Well, it means pause. Stop. So actually, when they would sing these songs, often when it says pause, they would stop. And often at that moment, a choir would sing. So the lamenter is lamenting, "Where are you, God? How could you have abandoned me?" And then a choir starts to sing and sing songs in Psalm 77, I believe it is, songs about the deliverance from Egypt and all the things God's done and remembering the faithfulness of God. And what it's doing is it's reminding our souls of the faithfulness of God. But it's not going around it, it's going through it. This is what is, this is who he is. It leads us back to trust and praise, not to glib, pat answers, but to praise that comes out of the soul that met God in the middle. Let me conclude, I hope, in a practical way. Great, Pastor, you came and you opened the scab. Now what happens? Well, let me leave you with a couple things that I hope are helpful. This is for taking care of your soul. One of the disciplines of soul care is learning to grieve well. Learning to weep in the right direction. If your goal in your faith is to be comfortable and happy, you're going to have a hard time. Because that's not what faith is about. If that's your goal, then disorientation in your life is totally going to throw you off the tracks. But if the goal of this is to be made into the image of Jesus and to find him, then when this hits, he's given us a way to find our way back to him. So often, let me be real clear. So when you're walking through a difficult time, how do these things work? This is not what happens. You don't say, you know what, this is a really hard day, so I think I'll read Psalm 13 and we'll be done. No. Sometimes it takes a day, sometimes it takes a month, sometimes it takes a year, 2 years, 3 years. But this is how it works. You bring it to God, you cry out to him, you invite him into the story, and you allow him to take those things and to weep with you and to heal you. He leads us through the pain and grief, and he redeems it. Paul says, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. I would say, don't let the sun go down on your grief. Bring it to him. Learn the discipline of grieving. Who wants to do that? Well, it's actually what brings healing. Here's some ideas how to do that practically. Do a grief journal. Wouldn't that be exciting? Yeah. Get a journal and use it to write to God, to speak to God those things. Some of it might be the stuff that you're facing right now. Some of it may be some stuff you buried a long time ago, and God wants to heal it. Write down the things that God brings to your memory and talk to him about it. When you do that and it starts to get painful, don't stop. Keep going. Last week I talked about Grace Church does these weekends called Making Peace with Your Past. If you need a jump start on some of it, it would be a great thing to do. Take a weekend, and this is what you're doing. You're looking back in the story and inviting him into it. Find a safe person that can help you in the process. The goal is not to write nice prayers. The goal is to bring what's on the inside out. We need to learn to do it as individuals. We need to learn to do it corporately. But it's not everybody that you want to take this stuff and bring it out in front of them, because not everybody wants to go there. When I was getting ready, preparing this series of sermons, Stephanie, who helps me, is always saying, what's the next thing coming? Think about it. So I'm trying to think ahead. I'm planning this. And one of the things I wanted to talk about in caring for your soul is learning to grieve well. Otherwise, your heart gets hard. So I'm laying it out, and I put it on August 1st. Boom. Not even really thinking about my own journey. As a family, we have decided, after my son's death, that we were either going to find God and he's real, or we weren't. But we were going to walk into it. We were going to let the pain take us where it goes. That happened in July of 2012. So we've chosen that the month of July, we're just going to grieve. That we're going to set that month aside, and whatever we need to do, we're going to do that. If we need to weep, we're going to weep. But I totally forgot that that was the month of July, and on August 1st, this is what I was going to be preaching about. Last week, we went to a family reunion, and it fell right on the day of my son's birthday. So we decided maybe that wouldn't be a good thing. It's hard sometimes to be around people on days like that. But it's your family, so we didn't have any choice, so we decided we'd go. The day of Josiah's birthday, that evening, our whole family got together. It's my wife's family. And it was the first time that we were all together. And my son wasn't there. So we looked at pictures and we told stories, and mostly we just cried. And for an hour and a half, that's what we did together. You can't do that with everybody, but when you can find some people who will do that with you, it's profoundly healing to weep and to bring it to God and to invite him to stay in the story with you. That was a gift to us. It's a gift to weep. So you're going, okay, Pastor Joel, so what do we do? Like next week, does everybody bring Kleenex? We're just going to have the... No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we have courage to walk in to what's in front of us and to lament and to weep and to let God heal us. This is what Jesus said. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. How does he comfort us? Well, he doesn't fix it. He feels it. He walks with us, and he redeems it. I want to close in prayer this morning, and we're going to sing a song that is a reminder. Think of it as a psalm. And at the pause, you say to yourself, yeah, but remember that always God is faithful. Always he's with us. And use that as our expression to God this morning. So pray with me, and I'll invite Ryan and the team to come, and we'll close together. Father, what can we say to a God who chose to suffer so that he could bear our burden and our pain? The only thing we can say is thank you. And the only thing that we can do is come and ask God that you would give us healthy souls that trust you, not tolerate you, not say nice things about you, but even in the valley of the shadow, that we learn to trust you and turn to you. Thanks. In Jesus' name.